All right, thank you for attending this morning's webinar on steering in the home buying process. And where you should live should be your choice. The choice of the person looking for homes, not the choice or not the decision of an agent who is directing, overriding that choice and kind of restricting certain people to certain communities and so forth. So real quick, the quick ground rules: webinar is being recorded. Questions go into the Q&A, not the chat. And of course, this webinar provides general information, not legal advice. If you need more specific information or guidance, whatever, contact our office, 313-579-FAIR or info@fairhouseinddetroit.org. And real quick too, for a closer look, this webinar will be posted. There's videos of other webinars and conferences are also on our website. So big thanks to Mishta for sponsoring this webinar. They sponsored a number of webinars. These are very, very helpful. So to begin, first off, there's a variety of steering practices when it comes to fair housing. Again, steering practices based on the protected class status of an applicant or tenant or resident and so forth. So it's a variety of different ways steering occurs. There can be targeting of minorities, predatory lending for predatory loans, apartment complex or management or owner can direct applicants to go to other properties. Oh, you have a child, maybe you would like going to such and such apartments that they're real close just down the street and they take children, things like that. That steering could also be steering within a certain complex. You know, putting minority residents in the back, white residents in the front, different things like that occur. So it really matters where someone is shown or given an opportunity to rent or buy a home. Then there can be statements by real estate agents or brokers that influence or limit a buyer's choice of certain communities. We're going to see maps and things of that. There's steering in the advertising or social media, depending on what advertising or what media sources are used. We had a case against a large senior housing facility. They used all white models in their ads. That's discriminatory. There's also steering in terms of land use and zoning ordinances and policies that eliminate or restrict housing opportunities in certain areas of municipalities. That's illegal as well. In this webinar, though, we're going to focus simply or directly on steering when it comes to real estate practices. In other words, during the home buying process. So to set the context, there's been stop this so I get good bandwidth. There are a variety of unlawful steering practices. And so what is the extent of the problem? To find out, HUD funded 3 national audits or fair housing studies carried out by the Urban Institute. The studies were done using match pair testers, similar to what took place in Long Island investigation, which we're going to talk about in a minute. So the 1991 report made 2 major points. First, Black and Hispanic homebuyers were often steered to neighborhoods that have a lower percentage of white applicants and less affluent than those recommended to comparable white homebuyers. This, we would all agree, is unlawful steering. Second, all homebuyers who began by asking about the availability of units advertised in major newspapers were likely shown and recommended houses in predominantly white neighborhoods rather than in integrated or minority neighborhoods. This is not something that is easily detected as unlawful steering because white, Black, Hispanic testers were shown the same listings. But the effect on minority communities or majority minority communities can be devastating and smacks of redlining. This is, to me, the problem we face today when we're talking about real estate agents, appraisers, lenders. They far too often are located in non-minority affluent communities and disproportionately serve those communities. The study points out that steering is difficult for individual home seekers to detect. Mapping, as we're going to see in a couple of minutes, and looking at Long Island investigation, is a key tool used to show racial steering. The 2000 study showed that white home buyers were favored over Black home buyers in 17% of the tests and over Hispanic home buyers in 19.7% of the tests. This study found that geographic steering on the basis of neighborhood racial composition increased significantly between 1989 and 2000. So steering most commonly occurs through informal, unsolicited comments directed to white home seekers about the racial composition of selected neighborhoods. And you can see these here, right? These are the kind of things that occur when there's steering occurring. So the question is this: how widespread is the problem of steering in the home buying process? Obviously, the previous studies show that it is a problem. There have been several news reports of this. And I'm going to go through start off with two kind of news reports that involved our office. This was first one goes back to the late 1990s. You can see it's a long-standing problem with real estate agent steering. So this is a short Channel 7 news report dating back to the late 1990s. Let me know if you have any trouble hearing it.
Now, special assignments.
Just 1 year after the Detroit riots, the Federal Civil Rights Act made it illegal for real estate agents to treat clients differently because of their race. But nearly 30 years later, housing discrimination is still dividing our neighborhoods by color. The Fair Housing Center of Metro Detroit received more than 200 complaints last year. Tonight on Special Assignment, Target 7 investigator Shelley Smith goes undercover to expose real estate racism. Shelley?
Well, Guy, you've heard the saying before, location, location, location. It's long been the creed of real estate agents everywhere. But our undercover investigation found here in Metro Detroit, the three most important elements in home sales are sometimes location, location, and race. It's one of the biggest purchases you'll ever make. And the person who holds the key to that new home is often a realtor. You rely on them to find the best deal, the best neighborhood, but you don't expect this. Okay. To find out just how often agents like this steer clients away from an area, we recruited two women, one white, one black. They both work as testers for the Fair Housing Center in Detroit. Channel 7 staffers posed as their husbands, and we invented cover stories to make their housing searches as similar as possible. Take a look. They're both homemakers. Their household income is about $50,000, and they are both pre-approved for a mortgage. Our white testers went first, visiting this RE/MAX office in Dearborn. They said they were looking for a 3-bedroom bungalow.
Well, we've been pre-approved for 90,000, and so we're thinking between 60 and 85.
They claimed to be new to the area and needed help finding a good location.
I don't even know how to say it. You want to be careful what you border.
Okay.
Okay. If you go Joy Road and Telegraph, you're getting into Redford.
Okay.
South Redford is wonderful. But if you go east, then you're bordering Detroit. And even though it's Southwest Detroit, it's still Detroit.
We showed our tape to the director of the Fair Housing Center, which monitors discrimination in our area.
Certainly, there are some things in that are questionable. We'd be interested in what the agent was thinking about when she referred to it as "it's still Detroit," as if there might be something wrong with that.
But when our white couple visited the Coldwell Banker office in Dearborn, the steering was clear. The tester showed Jim Carmen a list of homes she had selected from the multi-list of available properties. A home in Inkster topped her list.
No? Okay. Oh. Okay.
Real estate agents know they're not supposed to make those kind of statements, and yet they persist in making them. Certainly, that's very strong evidence of discriminatory treatment.
When our black testers visited Mr. Carmen, he showed them the listings book and then seemed to have a change of heart about helping them after talking to his broker.
He said he thought it would be best for you to go to the main office.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Okay.
Because like I say, I do mostly in the rentals, you know what I'm saying? And it would be better for you to be more qualified. They would tonight.
Okay.
Discrimination can take many forms. I mean, take an agent saying, "Well, I just do rentals," when in fact, for whites, he does sales and possibly rentals.
And you can show anything that we might see? Okay.
How common is that?
It's a very common thing. nationally, the statistics indicate that African Americans seeking housing are discriminated against in sales transactions at least 50% of the time.
We caught up with Jim Carmen at his office, hoping to get an explanation of why he tried to steer our white couple away from Inkster.
Well, I thought that the area wasn't right for it, that's all.
Why would
But I
you
would say-
tell him that?
Well, I don't think it is the way I see him, you know what I mean?
Why don't you think the area is right for him?
Well, I don't know, it's my opinion.
Okay.
Okay.
Do you know that's against the law to say something
Well,
like that?
yeah, I guess it would be.
Did you think that he wouldn't want to live in the same neighborhood as African Americans?
No, I wouldn't say that.
Well, why did you?
I
say
had a
that?
couple of people here this morning that were African American. Be glad to show them houses if they want.
That's not exactly how it went.
You think you could represent us if, if one of these houses we like? Because it's.
I'm really not too much up on it, you know what I'm saying? That really don't show how that might work.
Closing doors on potential home buyers doesn't just affect the racial makeup of a community, it can profoundly affect the individuals involved. Natalie, our tester, was once denied an apartment because of her color.
I had a rental agent for an apartment tell me that my people bring down the property values.
How did that make you feel when she said that?
It made me feel like less than a human. It made me feel just substandard. It made me feel that whatever strides that my people had made, that my parents had made, that I had made, were just of no consequence.
If you think you've been discriminated against by a realtor or a landlord, there are several agencies which can help. The Fair Housing Center in Detroit, which we already mentioned, the Michigan Department of Civil Rights, and HUD all take complaints of real estate racism. Diana?
All right, thank you, Shelley. Tomorrow night on Special Assignment, they thought
So you can see that it has been a problem historically in our community, and it's very, very sad. So that was from the 1990s. Here's early, 2006. There was another report. It's going to sound very, very similar. Plus, the percentage of discrimination that occurring is very, very high. And you'll see it's close to 50% when it comes to Black home buyers or home seekers.
Go undercover, hit the street, testing real estate offices at random, walking in and talking to a half a dozen local agents. In short order, we find racism is hard at work here in Metro Detroit. Come for a ride with a real estate agent we'll call Harry. The way Harry talks about African Americans in the city of Detroit, you might think we're traveling back in time.
Pretty much flat.
But make no mistake, it's 2006, and Harry wants to make sure white customers buy homes in one part of Metro Detroit and blacks buy homes in another. Rescue 4 hidden cameras roll, exposing the disgraceful secret of racism in real estate. It's called steering, when real estate agents direct you into one neighborhood and away from another. And it's illegal to steer if it's based on race, religion, or sexual orientation. But investigators say it happens all the time here in Metro Detroit. Don't believe it? Take a look at what Rescue 4 caught on hidden camera.
They don't want to do nothing. They want a job and get paid, and that's it, not have to do nothing. Of course, so.
That's certainly inappropriate, probably illegal.
Clifford Schrupp heads up the Fair Housing Center of Metropolitan Detroit. The private nonprofit puts real estate agents to the test, sending white clients and black clients with the same income to real estate offices to see if they are treated equal. He says almost half the time, whites are given preferential treatment.
That we ought to really live with each other, regardless of race, and that we can do so, and it makes for a better community when we do so.
Rescue 4 hit the streets to do some testing of our own. In several real estate offices, we found professionals who know discrimination laws on steering and abide by them.
We can't tell you what areas are good and what areas are not because we're licensed. We can get sued because it's against the law.
And then we found Harry, who blatantly ignores the law,
You want to steer the boat.
telling our white customer to steer clear of East Point because African Americans are moving in.
The house is everything fine and dandy, Just starting to get an influx of minorities.
When Rescue 4 sends in an African-American posing as a potential buyer, Harry's polite and courteous. Then he suggests the black buyer look at homes in East Point, the same city he told our white producer to steer clear of because minorities were moving in. Rescue 4 travels much of Metro Detroit with Harry. He tells us, we don't want to live in Southfield.
It's not white. Oh, not white. Not white at all. Pretty much black.
Not in Hamtramck
I would say probably 40% of the population right now is black.
or in Warren,
It's getting mixed. Oh, getting mixed?
and definitely not in Detroit.
That house down there, Detroit, that's just like a war zone. You wouldn't want to live there.
Harry tells us African Americans can make for bad neighbors.
These people don't, Mike, I hate to criticize them, they do it as human beings, but they don't want to do nothing. They want a job and get paid and that's it, not have to do nothing. Or something. Oh. Thinking about them, I can't help it, it's facts are facts.
He tells our white producer that St. Clair Shores is the perfect place for him. Our undercover black producer is never told about the house in St. Clair Shores, even though she was in the same price range, asking for similar homes. She would have missed out on the opportunity to buy in St. Clair Shores. The Fair Housing Commission says that's discrimination.
They don't know what somebody of a different race is being told.
Rescue 4 has seen enough of this realtor steering. It's time to talk to Harry. You know what steering is? The term
Yeah.
steering?
Oh, yeah.
It's when you tell
People certain go in a certain place.
and you know that's
Yeah.
illegal.
Sure it
Real estate game.
Sure it is.
But you've been doing that with this gentleman.
I showed them different houses where we wanted to go.
And you've told him that 40% black people live in Hamtramck or that Southfield's mostly black, which those are things you can't tell people.
No.
Harry denies it, even when I tell him it's all on Rescue 4 undercover hidden camera. But I'm going to be able to show you on camera that you are in fact saying that. You did in fact.
That I'm showing, that I'm saying that to them.
Correct.
They don't want to do nothing. I want it all. I would say probably a good 40% of the population right now is black. Unless you're gonna be down in Liable, down, something like that, pretty much black. I'll be very honest with you.
So those are two earlier reports, but it's still going on. And a really kind of a groundbreaking study occurred just recently during a 2016 to 2019 period in New York City, in Long Island. Long Island is a very affluent, very progressive, but it's also a very segregated area. So there was a 3-year investigation was done. There were 25 undercover testers who recorded the tests in the meetings with the real estate agents. They tested 93 agents, 240 hours of recordings, and involved 5,763 house listings. And what it found that there's discrimination, 19% against Asians, 39% against Hispanics, and close to 50%, 49% against Blacks. Just outrageous. So what happens is black buyers were risking facing disadvantages, and almost half the times they contacted brokers. And then the Long Island's leading residential broking firms helped solidify these racial separations and divisions. They directed white customers toward majority white communities and minority borrowers, Black and Hispanic, toward more integrated or majority minority communities. They also avoided business in communities with overwhelmingly minority populations. And according to Professor Greg Squires, put it this way: it happened in one of the most educated, most liberal regions of the country. These are significant numbers. He says this is something that didn't happen in the Deep South. Very sad. I'm going to show a short clip here and to show kind of what's occurring. Just about 9 minutes. Let me pull it up.
Unless you don't want to store your cars by your friend.
That rules don't apply to you and another home buyer in the same way.
Okay.
I definitely need them.
Long Island is one of America's most segregated suburbs. Newsday set out to discover what role real estate agents might play in keeping it that way, potentially affecting the quality of lives.
Technically, as a real estate agent, we shouldn't tell the buyers.
In house hunting, it's nearly impossible to see evidence of hidden discrimination. You would never know unless you go undercover.
In one test, Johnny Mae Alston was the black tester and Cindy Parry was the white tester. And they met with Anne Marie Quealy Bichon at Signature Premier Properties office in Cold Spring Harbor. They asked for the same thing. As often happens, the agent discussed getting pre-qualified or pre-approved for a mortgage by a bank, showing how much a buyer can spend on a house.
My husband's working with somebody at the bank.
We've done some preliminary talks, about getting pre-approval.
Neither had been pre-approved or pre-qualified. Here's what the agent told the black tester.
So I really done, most of that, I have a pre-qualification. So I need to.
So that means I can't.
Qualify for a mortgage.
So that means I can't go out to see anything.
I won't do it, you can try another person, but I don't have the time.
And without pre-approval, here's what the agent told the white tester.
What is
I would say not to.
Cindy received 79 listings from this agent. Johnny Mae couldn't get any listings. And Cindy, the white tester, received 2 home tours. They had the same finances, the same budget, and they made the same request in the same area. But one was white, the other was black. The agent treated them differently. Quealy Bichon did not respond to a letter, calls, and emails. Her agency's Signature Premier Properties co-owner and 2 branch managers viewed the recordings and declined to comment.
A 3-year undercover Newsday investigation revealed evidence of widespread hidden discrimination by real estate agents brokering home sales across Long Island. For Hispanic home seekers, evidence of unfair treatment emerged 39% of the time. For Asians, the rate was 19%. Black house hunters in the investigation risked unequal, lesser access to homes and communities just about half the time when compared to white buyers. Kelvin Toon is a black man in his early 50s, and he went in to meet with an agent involving a test in the Brentwood community, a community that is 80% Hispanic and black. The agent communicated to Kelvin, our black tester, that she enjoyed meeting with clients from the Brentwood area.
Every time I get a new listing in Brentwood or a client, I get so excited because they're nice people.
When we sent Kelvin's counterpart in to meet with the same agent, white tester was actually warned about Brentwood not being a nice place.
The nursing home we need to be near is in Brentwood. And so we found a couple that are in Brentwood. Okay. And it just seemed like those would be handy also for going to visit.
I'll look into
Yeah, I can do that.
That warning came later to the white tester saying there was concern about gang activity. This agent wanted the white tester to know, but that information wasn't provided to Kelvin, the black tester. The listings centered black tester Kelvin in Brentwood with 27 house listings, while the white tester got 0 listings in Brentwood and was directed towards much whiter neighborhoods. Vickery said she had warned only the white tester about gang activity because she had not been aware of it when she met with the black tester, despite widespread media coverage. She also said her business partner, Gene Gillen, sent the listings to the black tester. Gillen said the listings were unquestionably prepared based on Vickery's criteria, and that Vickery may have sent the listings using Gillen's email. She said she didn't know the race of the black tester until she met him later on a house tour. Keller Williams, which was their employer at the time, released this statement. Keller Williams does not tolerate discrimination of any kind. All complaints of less than exemplary conduct are addressed and resolved.
Newsday conducted 86 tests that matched white and black, white and Hispanic, and white and Asian buyers. We focused on agents associated with the 12 brands that represented more than half of the island's home sellers in 2017. The primary question was whether the agents provided equal service. Was one tester provided more listings than the other? Also, where were those listings placed? Did the agent recommend similar neighborhoods to both testers?
Here in test 56, the agent Frederick Wallen provided the testers with comparable listings.
In my eyes, you're a buyer, you're a buyer. I wanted to give the potential buyer a more diverse look and background of the Hamptons and what they like.
The same two testers from number 56 met with a different agent, Kevin Getty, in test 59. And despite asking for the same parameters, they received disparate listings.
All right, I'm going to stop right there. But if you look at, go back here. The mappings are, this is the example, this slide shows how it's supposed to look. You can see the properties that were being shown to the white tester and properties or listings that were given to the black tester. And you can see how they're kind of evenly distributed. That's how it's supposed to be. And the decision is on to the prospective buyer to make a decision where to live. On this next one, right, this is problematic because if you look at the listings that were given to the white tester, or they call it white listings, whatever, those are the blue ones on the left. And you can see, right, there's like the straight line. And then the listings given to the black tester or black listings are on the right. There's only one that's kind of an outlier, and that's on the far left. There's a, kind of a red dot there. But by and large, it's directing black testers or posing as home seekers to integrated or minority communities and doing the opposite when it comes to white testers. That is classic example of steering in the real estate practice. Real estate practices that constitute steering. But the question is, we're going to look at now, like, what laws address it? And what does it take to prove a violation and stop this from occurring? First off, I'll get into the law quite a bit here. You'll notice that there is no, steering is not mentioned specifically in the Fair Housing Act, the Civil Rights Acts of 1866 and 70, called, we use those in sections 1981, 1982, and the Equal Credit Opportunity Act. There is, however, 2 Supreme Court cases that involve claims of unlawful racial steering. There's the Gladstone Realtors case and Havens Realty. Lower federal courts have found steering violates Section 804A, the now or refusal or otherwise make unavailable. It's discrimination under the Fair Housing Act, 804B, discrimination as terms and conditions. It also can be a violation of 804C involving discriminatory statements, or D, misrepresentation regarding the availability of housing. And then HUD's regulation, Fair Housing Act implementing regulations in section 100.70 treats steering as violating section 804A, otherwise make unavailable or deny. So how did the Supreme Court define it? the Supreme Court in Gladstone, realtors and havens define steering in real estate practices. And you can see the definitions there. I'm not gonna take time to read them. But again, it's directing borrowers, home buyers, prospective home buyers interested in a similar or same type of properties to different areas according to their race. In the underlying policy, Judge Damon Keith and Zuck versus Hussey, this is a great definition, and he worked here out of Detroit. And the case is still frequently cited by other courts. And his point was that steering deprives the home seeker of the freedom of choice. And notice too, Judge Keith points out that this can be done by word or phrase or action. And quote, I'm going to quote Judge Keith, where choice influencing factors such as race are not eliminated, freedom of choice in the purchase of real estate becomes a fantasy. It is a freedom of choice for the purchaser, which the Fair Housing Act protects. Judge Keith's emphasis on the freedom of choice policy is carried over into HUD's regulation. Section 100.70 subsection A prohibits based on protected class status, the restriction or attempt to restrict choices by word or conduct to perpetuate segregated housing patterns or to discourage or obstruct choices. You do not have to establish that the steering segregates or perpetuates segregated housing, just that housing choices have been discouraged or obstructed. So section 100.70 subsection B talks about provision of housing or services. So what are the violations? 4 examples are provided in HUD's regulation 100.70C. First, top left is discouraging, inspecting, or purchase because of the protected class of persons in a community or development. In the top right, exaggerating drawbacks or failing to inform of desirable features of housing in a community or development. In the bottom left, telling a prospective purchaser that he or she would not feel comfortable or compatible with existing residents. In the bottom right, assigning a person to a particular section of a community or development. There are also 5 additional examples in 100.70D. The examples include using codes or other devices to segregate or reject applicants, refusing to take or to show listings, or refusing to deal with certain brokers or agents. So HUD covered it pretty well in its regulation. So question is, well, who can bring a claim based on unlawful steering practices? Well, the answer is anyone injured or aggrieved by unlawful steering practices. It can be a home seeker, residents of the community that are being denied the benefits of an integrated community. Municipalities can also do it because they have an interest in ensuring what? Qualified buyers come into their neighborhood and are not unfairly restricted because of their race or other protected class status. Fair housing organizations have standing, and testers themselves have standing to bring claims. So that's the parties who can bring a claim, but who are the parties who are responsible or can be held liable for engaging in unlawful steering? Well, it includes owners and brokers who engage in unlawful steering. Certainly, owners can be, their agents and brokers can be as well. And a common argument that's made when steering occurs is that the contractual language in the agreement between the real estate agent and the broker, many of the real estate agents work as independent contractors. However, courts do not hold independent contractor as a valid defense. If they're an independent contractor, is a state law question. Liability is determined as a matter of federal law. And so independent contractor status does not affect liability of the agent engaging in the steering, nor does it avoid liability or insulate a broker from liability when steering occurs. Another question is, well, to prove liability, what kind of intent? Does intent have to be shown? Well, cases are clear that unlawful steering requires proof of intent. I mean, there may be, I'm just not aware of any case involving disparate impact theory of liability where intent isn't required. So typically, steering cases involve proof, it's required to have proof of discriminatory intent. So how can it be proven? Well, intent can be established through direct or indirect circumstantial evidence. There's no need to show that the steering was successful. Just the attempt to steer someone to one community or another based on protected class status is unlawful. And so as you see the Leadership Council case, any action by a real estate agent which in any way impedes, delays, or discourages on a racial basis a prospective home buyer from purchasing housing is unlawful. Question 2 is, how many incidents have to occur to establish steering? Cases are clear. A single incident of steering alone is a violation of the Fair Housing Act, period. That one incident of steering occurred, or that more than one incident occurs, only demonstrates a pattern of such violation, but it doesn't mean that each incident standing alone is not a violation of the Fair Housing Act. It is. In the examples, I mean, we saw it in the videos, especially in the first 2 Detroit videos. I kind of cut short before it got into some of these quotes from the Long Island Divided, but there, the agents were saying, follow the school bus, see the moms that are hanging out on the corners. So she's referring to what? Racial or ethnicity of the moms on the corners. And here it is. Some of them are not. Here's another comment by another agent. Some of them are not as nice. Elmont, most of Hempstead, Roosevelt, so forth. You know, maybe not as nice in terms of statistics, probably referring to crime statistics. And it's even more direct on the right one. In East Hampton, the Hispanic community came in and they really took over. So that's example of how it can be for proving unlawful steering through direct evidence. Steering can also be proven. In many of the cases, there is no direct evidence of unlawful steering. The challenge is coming up with what elements of a prima facie case of discrimination occurs. The court in Open Metro Communities versus Rossi Realty noted that a typical prima facie elements do not readily apply to steering elements. So various formulations have been identified by HUD in its element of proof memorandum and by the courts. The Cabrera case simplifies it at the bottom. It says, as long as the plaintiff can prove that a defendant afforded an African-American person fewer housing opportunities than a similarly situated white person on account of race, the plaintiff has made out a prima facie case under Title VIII, under the Fair Housing Act. That's all that needs to be shown. Now, HUD's element of proof memorandum, which is really widely used by civil rights investigators, by HUD and various state and local fair house or agencies, use the HUD's element of proof. There's 5 elements. It is that the complaint is member protected class. The complainant sought to buy or rent housing from the respondent. The respondent offered the complainant housing in a protected class concentrated building or area. The respondent had another dwelling available in a building or area not concentrated by the complainant's protected class, but the respondent did not offer the complainant the dwelling in the building or area not concentrated by the persons of the protected class. So that's one formulation. And it says here, they apply when the respondent steered. There's another element. When the respondent steered complainant away from the desired housing, here's an alternative formulation. Complainant's a member protected class. Complainant sought to buy or rent housing from the respondent. The respondent discouraged the complainant from pursuing the housing. Respondent encouraged someone not of the complainant's protected class to pursue such housing. So you can see there are various formulations of it to prove it through indirect circumstantial evidence. An alternative standard is HUD versus Housing Authority of Las Vegas. That's 4 prima facie elements in a case that's similar to HUD's elements for steering into a segregated neighborhood. And you can see these here. But these formulations really do not really fit exactly into a real estate steering context. I'm advocating, I think the best approach is the one found in the Village of Bellwood case. And the standard that it's a very simple one that the court came up with, the 7th Circuit. It says, quote, blacks were shown primarily houses in black areas and whites primarily in houses in white areas to place on the defendants the burden of giving a non-invidious or non-discriminatory reason for the differences in treatment. And also, you can see how that ties into the mapping when it shows that blacks were given or black testers were shown homes in primarily black or minority communities and whites in primarily non-minority or white communities. Then they have to come up with an explanation or they'll be liable for discrimination, unlawful steering, unless there's some non-discriminatory, non-invidious reason for the difference in treatment. The Village of Bellwood case also set forth a helpful jury instruction in real estate agent steering cases. And it says, even if you decide that there is no or insufficient direct evidence of a racially motivated difference in treatment, if you find the defendants showed their black customers primarily homes in predominantly black areas and their white customers primarily homes in predominantly white areas, and if in addition you do not believe the defendant's explanation of this pattern, then you may infer that the defendants were steering their customers racially. That is a real good, I think it's a little bit general, but it really fits proving instances of racial steering. And how do you do it? Again, coming back to the map. This map right here certainly should be sufficient to establish a prima facie case of unlawful steering. Then the burden of production then shifts to the defendant or the agent or broker to give a non-invidious reason for the mapping or geographical evidence of steering. And I think that's going to be a difficult thing to show. What's the reason for not offering the black tester listings or giving the black tester listings in predominantly non-minority or white areas? And what's the reason for not offering the white tester, providing the white tester with listings in non-majority white communities? Again, these dots, right, blue and red, should have been evenly distributed through the entire map. And the agent who did that explained he likes to give all of his customers freedom to select the area where they want to live. So here's what often comes up. These are common defenses or arguments that get raised in real estate agent steering cases. These can all be addressed. They may say, well, we gave truthful answers. Ask me about crime or schools. I gave truthful answers to it, right? Or what does it say? Professor Schwem kind of distinguishes it this way. He puts it into three categories. There's one situation if the salesperson, the agent, initiates the discussion intended to influence choice. Certainly that's viewed as unlawful steering. In all the videos that we just showed previously, all of this steering and that all the statements came directly from the agent. Wasn't said anything by the testers. So that's clearly going to be unlawful. The second part is if the customer initiates the discussion. In other words, the customer asks a question, brings up the topic, and then the salesperson responds to the question by trying to still influence the customer's or the buyer's choice on racial or ethnic grounds. That's going to be considered unlawful steering. However, if there's customer initiated questions where the agent, salesperson gives brief, objective, concise, non-judgmental, and factually accurate answers, probably not going to be viewed as unlawful steering, though the courts have not really addressed this kind of question. And again, getting back to Judge Keith in Zuck, he really gets into the point of what is really taking place here. Is the real estate agent trying to undertake an effort to influence the choice of a prospective homebuyer on a racial basis? And Judge Keith says, whether on his own initiative or in response to the buyer's initiative, the agent either directly or indirectly discourages the prospective home buyer from purchasing a home in a particular area. And he notes too, where the housing has traditionally been denied to blacks because of their race, this conduct tends to perpetuate racially segregated communities. This court concludes as a matter of law that steering violates 804A of the Fair Housing Act. There's other cases, again, getting into the fact that, well, we're just giving helpful information, right? And community service, the Third Circuit case in 2005 said the reason or purpose doesn't need to be malicious or invidious and is a violation to discriminate even if the motive is benign or paternalistic. Period. Can't steer. Even if I'm trying to help the buyer get an area where their family would be most comfortable. No, that's not the role of the agent. It's the buyers that make that decision. Again, discrimination based on any kind of unlawful protected class basis is liable. It's illegal under the Fair Housing Act, even if the defendant is not shown to be motivated by personal prejudice or animus. And economic motivation is another factor. Well, we're not going to make a lot of money and things of that nature, right? The cases say, even though the primary goal is to make money, not to violate the Fair Housing Act, if race enters into it, they're liable. So economic motivation, right, is not a defense when it comes to racial steering cases. So just a little bit more in a log and 3 illustrative cases that show how this works. These are all 3 from the Sixth Circuit, which governs Michigan, Ohio, Tennessee, and Kentucky. So it's binding, one step below the US Supreme Court. And in McDonald, right, Mr. McDonald went to the Office of Real Estate 1 to ask about status of home in MacArthur Park property. And he told that he was interested in purchasing some investment property. And then Mr. Holderness informed him of a number of properties which are suitable to purchase for investment reasons, but he didn't mention the MacArthur Park property. And the McDonald inquired for a number of times whether there were any property for sale in MacArthur Park, and the agent said, oh no, there's not. And then after various persistent inquiries, then Mr. Holderness finally told him there's a piece of property for sale in MacArthur Park area. And see, so, right, but then he said, well, the agent said, well, I'm interested in purchasing the property for myself. And later on, when he found out financing wasn't available, he decided not to proceed further with it. So here's what the court found, right? Because in the initial interaction, he stated he preferred not to sell the property to blacks, was effectively implemented when they rejected McDonald's offer of $27,500, even though they previously wanted to sell to a white buyer at the same figure. And the point that the court made is, even though after the filing of the lawsuit, the McDonald's were successful in purchasing the home, doesn't alter the fact of the prior discriminatory conduct, nor does it wipe out the fact of consideration of damages. And then as to Holderness, his entrance into the series of negotiations, during that time, he accurately informed verbal of the requirements of federal law banning racial discrimination in housing. Yet later, he failed to tell the McDonald's of the listing of the property until forced to do so. And still later, he clearly made available information to a white prospect, which he had not been made available to a willing black buyer. All of those are liable for discrimination in terms of racial steering. So again, the point the court was making is accurate information has to be given to a prospective home buyer at the onset. At the time they initially ask for home listings, they should be given all available home listings. Can't like steer them into certain areas or deny listings and later backtrack and do so. They're still liable. It's not fixable because discrimination still occurred. In the second case, ICE Community Congress versus in Hilltop Realty, defendants argued that truthful informational statements with a racial content were given to show homes in a particular location, absent a specific request and lack of service, do not violate the Fair Housing Act. The district court says no. They said that to violate the Fair Housing Act, one needs to look to whether the statement or conduct would have an untoward effect on a reasonable person under the circumstances who is seeking housing, and behind the statement or conduct to the intent of an agent. If a statement or act would have a discriminatory effect and is made with the intent to steer, it violates section 804, 3604A. And then the actions of the agents. In that case, Heights Community Congress case, the defendants argued that the district court erred, finding Hilltop liable for discrimination, and finding that Hilltop had the power to control the acts of its agents. It argues that its agents were independent contractors over whom it had no common law right to control. And the court said, Sixth Circuit said this argument is consistently rejected in fair housing cases. And it said also looked at the factual fact that Hilltop didn't dispute the district court's finding that it knew what its agents were doing, that they were engaging in fair housing violations, and didn't take corrective action despite its assertive policy of instructing agents in fair housing law and urging that they act accordingly. So that shows you how courts do not use independent contractor status as a defense to a violation. The third and last one is Sanders versus Doris. And this is interesting facts in this one. Look at this. In 10 years as a real estate agent in the Nashville area, Doris never sold a house in Greenbrier to a Black person, had only once shown a house in Greenbrier to a potential Black purchaser. Amazing. And even though Century 21 sold home to Blacks in Springfield, a racially mixed community, none of the agents could ever recall showing or selling a house in Greenbrier to Blacks. And interesting, the house, there's all statistical evidence, housing price in Greenbrier are indistinguishable from housing prices in Springfield. And during the period that the Sanders were looking to purchase a home, there were more homes for sale in Greenbrier than in Springfield, right? The Sixth Circuit found the district court erred in finding there was no evidence that the defendants engaged in a pattern of racial steering of Black buyers away from Greenbrier. And it's irrelevant whether Century 21 agents had represented Black clients, since the statistical evidence indicated they steered Black clients away from predominantly white community of Greenbrier and steered them to the racially mixed community of Springfield. And that's something. So that's what discrimination looks like. Again, this is not quite a map with this one. I suppose, you know, if testers were out there and got the information, I'm sure the map would have been the same that we saw in terms of the, you know, separate white listings, Black listings that was shown in the Newsday investigation in Long Island. So again, what the bottom line from this, what do we need to do? Is really testing is a key tool in determining whether racial steering has occurred. And it's important too for people to make complaints so that that kind of testing and analysis can be done, right? Because the only way really to establish it, unless the kind of direct statements are made, and that often, you know, that can occur. Otherwise, right, looking to see what listings are given to Black individuals or Black testers, what listings are given to Hispanic individuals or Hispanic testers, and what listings are given to white testers or white home buyers. And then mapping that out is very, very key. All right, I'm gonna kind of stop here. I'm gonna say, just to kind of do this in a future training, but it's one thing to just point to violations in terms of what real estate agents are doing in terms of racial steering. The question is, well, part of it. The other part of it is, well, what do we do to help real estate agents in addressing the situations that may give rise to claims of racial steering? Here's some examples of the kind of questions, and I'm going to cover this in a future training, type of questions that can come from home sellers. Here, I believe that as a homeowner, I have the right to sell my own home. A local broker told me that I cannot sell my home for my required price to the person I want. Is this true? In other words, can the homeowner select the buyer? What issues does that raise? Could you call and tell me who you're showing my house to? Will property values go down if minorities move in? What kind of answers should be given by the agent in that situation? And the bottom one, the condominium association, it's not always individual single-family home sales, right? Sometimes there's condo co-op properties. The condominium association, or co-op board, or homeowner association does not want someone who makes a lot of demands to move in. I think they may want to keep someone with a wheelchair out of this unit, since it would require a ramp and a special parking place. So those are important questions, kind of questions that come up. How about this? sometimes the difficult questions come from home buyers. Right? What is the racial composition of this neighborhood? Or I only want to see white, Jewish, black, etc. neighborhoods. How should what answer should be given if a prospective buyer says that? What if they ask, are there high crime or the high quality schools in the area? Where are all the white moving to now that the area is integrated, or is there a lot of crime in this area? So the plan is to have training on that, right? There's more questions. This is just a sampling of the kind of questions so that real estate agents and brokers are alert to the kind of questions that occur and answer questions that are in full compliance with fair housing. And not only that, provide the equality of opportunity and choice, which underlies, right, our fair housing standards and principles. So any questions? I hope this was helpful. Any questions at all? If you'd like to contact us, first of all, our services, we do receive complaints. We do the intake of complaints. We investigate. We engage in testing. We do enforcement. The board member just asked me over yesterday and today, you know, how often do we file cases in court? And I gave that data along with complaints that we had filed with HUD and the Michigan Department of Civil Rights. Many times we're able to resolve complaints and concerns without going to court or going before HUD and the Michigan Department of Civil Rights. We're always available to answer fair housing questions. We provide a great deal of training and education. We really emphasize that. I don't think it's fair to hold people liable when they haven't been informed of what the fair housing laws require. We're able to do that. Certainly we want people to get the training so they avoid any kind of a violation and do the right thing. That's the best circumstance for our community. Feel free to call us. Again, our number is 313-579-FAIR, or you can go to our website, fairhousingdetroit.org, and you can do an online complaint or inquiry there. Any other questions or comments? I will stop the recording and we can do an encore, and then give you an opportunity to ask any questions. Either you'd rather not have, you know, in a recorded setting or maybe off topic, but please feel free to do so. And finally, please check out our website under events and trainings at fairhousingdetroit.org for future training opportunities. Thank you so much for being here and participating in our webinar. I hope the information was helpful to you. Thank you so much.